presently reading this Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. It is about the Victorian social era. The novel begins at the beginning with the old rigmarole of childhood, and the first two chapters are full of references of fairy tales. Like modern feminists, Elizabeth Gaskell recognized the forces of these ritual stories told to children in forming expectations. Not only was she familiar with all the standard collections, uh, she shows that they are living force describing a castle full of fairy tale characters transformed into Victorian social types. And just as many fairy tales suggest, rites of passage or initiation tests by which girls and boys become men and women. So, Wives and Daughters begins with motherless Molly Gibson at the age of 12, putting on new festive clothes, leaving her father and home, and entering the enclosed grounds of a house called the Towers, where she loses her godmothers, falls asleep, and is awakened by a lady with several names who will later become her stepmother. So Molly is shown adult life at its most stately and hierarchical. Lord Dumornor, who frightens her by pretending to be Father Bear to her Goldilocks, is a mixture of fairy tale grotesque and genuine feudal and patriarchal power, a cross between an archangel and a king. So, I mean, it's really interesting. You will go through it, and uh, she Gaskell's work is not of rage and rebellion, but informed and steady resistance to aggressive authority, advocating the importance of female friendship, rational rational motherhood, and the power of speech as forces of social change. So you find that as you read a sharp, warm 19th century coming of age about step families, gossips, and class in a small English town. Now, this, as I've just mentioned, this Molly Gibson. Now, I'm talking about a 17-year-old, kind, honest, a little naive. She lives quietly with her widowed father, Dr. Gibson, a respected doctor in Hollingford. And then you have another character known as Mrs. Hyacinth Kirkpatrick, a pretty shallow, self absorbed widow with a taste for social climbing, and her daughter Cynthia, glamorous and flirty. So she's a stepmother now. So Molly Gibson's life flips when Dr. Gibson remarried Hyacinth. So that's it. Two wives, two daughters, and you have a lot of friction, one hold and a lot of friction you have, one father. And talking about the main plot threads, Molly versus the world's expectation. Molly is thrown into society and expected to be accomplished like Cynthia. She's not. She's earnest and clumsy in drawing rooms, but deeply moral. She gets caught in scandals she didn't cause because she's too loyal to defend herself. And then, while you read, you come across this the love triangle, or rather a square. These boys, Roger Hamley, younger son of Squire Hamley, naturalist, awkward, good hearted, everyone underestimated him. Then you have this Osborne Hamley, the eldest son, handsome, poetic, the father's favorite, secretly married to French Catholic nursery maid, which would ruin him socially. Then, of course, you have Cynthia, flirts with both the brothers, then with others. Pretty charming but secretive, self protective from a messy past. And you have Molly, the protagonist, loves Roger quietly for years, but he sees her as a sister, which is a pain. And then you have this lot of gossip around this glass plus science plus gossip. Hollingford runs on gossip. Hollingford is a town, and it seems it's written a woman's reputation can die in one afternoon in the gossip streams, rather. Meanwhile, Roger becomes a scientist and goes to Africa on an expedition. Victorian England is just starting to respect men of courage over men of birth. So that is a change you find in Victorian England. And Gaskell uses this to show old aristocracy fading and merit rising. Then you have the stepmother problem. Mrs. Gibson is not evil, just rapid and manipulative. She favors Cynthia, undermines Molly, performs virtue for status. That is. Gaskell's genius is making her funny. That's her genius, to make her funny and not a villain per se. So if you go through it, you'll find perspectives. While the whole book is about misreading people, Molly misreads Cynthia, the town misreads Molly, Squire Hamley misreads both his sons. Only Roger eventually sees clearly. Then we can talk about the chivalric behavior modernized. For example, like Roger's chivalric act is not swordplay. It's defending Molly's reputation when gossip turns on her. Even though he gains nothing, he must be honorable because that is who he is. And talking about daughters versus wives, titles, the thesis, the daughters, that is Molly and Cynthia, have to navigate a world built by wives, Mrs. Gibson, Mrs. Hamley, who enforce the rules. Gaskell asks, what kind of wife will you be? And going through that, you see, uh, now, before ending the novel, Elizabeth Gaskell dies, and it is the editor who has finished the novel with her notes. So, what is chivalric in the end? That is, it's quiet virtue over social glitter. Talking a little about the spoiler resolution, Osborne dies of illness, the secret marriage revealed, Squire Hamley is devastated. Roger returns from Africa, a celebrated scientist. He finally sees Molly, not Cynthia. Cynthia is married to a decent lawyer. Molly and Roger end up together, and Mrs. Gibson keeps on gossiping. And so that is it. In a town where a woman's name on a plaque would be praise, but her name in gossip is ruin. Molly Gibson learns being good is harder than being charming, and the chivalric man notices the difference. So we find that if we take mothers as the absent term in the title Wives and Daughters, it is significant that Molly acquires not a mother but a stepmother. Modern feminists agree that patriarchal structures have driven a wedge between mothers and daughters because the necessary socialization of daughters into wives is perceived by the daughter as an outrage which could be perpetuated only by a false or stepmother. I mean, even mothers would do that because basically, when a daughter is growing up in the Victorian age, the basic thing was that she be able to be a good wife and bring up a good household of children and husband. So now, Mr. Gibson, although is a humane man in a nurturing profession, his refusal to articulate emotions is a version of the masculine lie. Masculine lie which prevents humane emotion becoming part of the dominant ideology. Masculine silence promotes not only dutiful self suppression, but deviousness and evasion in women. As Molly becomes aware of her stepmother's webs, distortions of truth, she keeps silence from the desire of sparing her father any discord. She worries whether this silence was right or wrong, but her father's example of silence made her hold her tongue. So you go through such instances in the book. As you go on, you feel that silence Molly adopts to please her father is developed in Cynthia as a product of education. Mrs. Gibson's education, that is her mother. And Cynthia's problem is that although she excels in the art of pleasing, attracting multiple offers of marriage, she does not relish marriage. Although her success with Mr. Preston makes her feel a little queen, what makes her feel like Cinderella when the clock was striking 12 is not losing Prince Charming but having to marry him after the ball is over. In this situation, moreover, statements of dislike are counterproductive. Preston, like, uh, okay, we won't talk about that, is like, uh, read for yourself and find out. Another thing is, I mean, I'm just in Wives and Daughters, an everyday story, Roger Hamley demonstrates that there is no essential difference between the attention required for scientific knowledge and that which creates the intuitive knowledge of most women's daily life. So he examines two abnormal leaves of the ash tree with the same care with which he reads Molly's eloquent look of pain, sort of. And I was reading another book by Patsy Stoneman, Elizabeth Gaskell, key women writers, that she says that Roger Hamley was directly modeled on Elizabeth Gaskell's cousin Charles Darwin, and her enthusiastic acceptance in Wives and Daughters of evolutionary theory, both as a scientific truth and a mode of social progress, was more characteristic of Unitarian thought than the panic response of Sylvia's lovers. So it's a very interesting story, and Elizabeth Gaskell's women refuse to suffer and be still. Moved by human needs, they claim a human voice to bear witness to the truth. A great read, gives you a peep into the Victorian society. Very well written, very interesting. Have a read.